The Alliance station floated quietly between stars. A massive ring of metal and light, where dozens of species lived and worked together. To many, it was a place of progress and unity. To some, it was a place of judgment. The alien woman stood near the wide viewing window, watching distant stars drift past. Her people were known for their elegant forms and smooth movements, but she no longer fit that image. One of her legs moved slower than the other, supported by a slim mechanical brace. Fine scars crossed the side of her neck and shoulder, hidden most of the time beneath simple clothing. They were old war injuries, earned while defending a trade route long before the Alliance had even existed. She was not ashamed of them, but she had learned what they meant in the eyes of others. Around her, voices flowed in many languages. Laughter, negotiations, polite greetings. Near the center of the hall was the pairing chamber, where representatives of different species met to form unions, partnerships, and long-term bonds. For many cultures, such bonds were important for diplomacy and shared futures. She had been brought here like the others. Her name was recorded. Her history was verified. Her physical condition was listed with careful, cold accuracy. Limited mobility, visible scarring, reduced lifespan probability. No one spoke these words to her face, but she knew them by heart. Others passed her by. Some glanced at her and quickly looked away. Some whispered softly, not unkindly, but with the distant tone people used when discussing damaged equipment rather than a living being. She felt no anger, only a quiet heaviness she carried with practiced calm. She had stood in this hall before. Each time, the result was the same: unchosen. She reminded herself that she had survived worse than this. War had taught her patience. Loss had taught her silence. Across the hall, a group of humans entered for the first time that cycle. Humans were still relatively new to the Alliance. They were physically unimpressive by galactic standards, lacking claws, thick armor, or natural weapons. Yet they had earned respect through persistence and surprising adaptability. One of them slowed as he stepped inside. His name was Daniel Carter, an engineer assigned to the station for a long-term exchange. He had expected strange architecture and unfamiliar faces. He had not expected the quiet weight in the room, the unspoken rules written into the way people stood and looked at one another. He watched as pairing discussions began. He noticed patterns quickly. Perfect symmetry drew attention. Smooth skin, confident posture. The ones with any visible difference were ignored with polite efficiency. Then he noticed her. She was not trying to attract attention. She stood slightly apart, hands folded, gaze calm. When she shifted her weight, he saw the brace on her leg and the careful way she adjusted her stance. There was no self-pity in her expression, only endurance. Something about that caught his attention more than any flawless form in the room. Daniel did not approach her immediately. He observed. He watched how others avoided standing too close. He noticed how she listened carefully when spoken to, responding with clarity and intelligence, yet never pushing herself forward. He felt an uncomfortable familiarity. Back on Earth, he had seen veterans treated much the same way. Praised in words, forgotten in action. When the session paused, he finally walked toward her. "Hello," he said gently, using the standard translator. "I'm Daniel." She turned her head slightly, surprised. Few initiated conversation with her here. "I am called Saris," she replied. Her voice was calm, controlled. "You may address me so. I hope I'm not interrupting," Daniel said. "You are not," she said honestly. No one was speaking to me. There was no bitterness in her tone. That somehow made the statement heavier. Daniel nodded. "Is this your first time here?" "No," Saris answered. "It is my fourth." He hesitated, then asked, "And, has anyone chosen you before?" Her eyes flicked briefly to the floor, then back to the stars beyond the window. "No." 2F action. Daniel felt a quiet tightening in his chest. "May I ask why?" She considered him for a moment. Many would find the question rude. She did not. "Because my body no longer meets the expectations of most cultures," she said simply. "I was injured during conflict. I survived. That survival is seen as undesirable. Daniel let out a slow breath. That's strange to us. She tilted her head slightly. Strange? On Earth, he said, choosing his words carefully. Survival like that is respected. Not always perfectly, but it matters. Sarah studied his face, searching for hidden meanings. She found none. Only sincerity and curiosity. Before she could respond, a station coordinator announced the end of the session. Another cycle completed, another quiet dismissal. Saris prepared to leave as she always did. Saris, Daniel said quickly, would you consider speaking with me again? Outside of this hall? Her posture stiffened slightly. For what purpose? To learn, he replied honestly. About you, your culture, your history. She was silent for a long moment. She had learned to be cautious. Hope was a dangerous thing. Very well, she said at last. One conversation. They met in a quiet observation corridor later that day. Through the transparent wall, a pale blue nebula glowed softly. Daniel listened more than he spoke. Saris told him of her homeworld, of wide-open skies and crystalline seas. She spoke of the war, not with pride or sorrow, but as fact. She had commanded logistics units, ensuring supply lines held while others fought on the front lines. When a transport failed, she had stayed behind to reroute power manually, saving hundreds. The explosion that followed had changed her body forever. And afterward? Daniel asked. Afterward, she said, I was thanked. I was honored. Then I was quietly set aside. Daniel shook his head slowly. That doesn't make sense. To your species, she replied. He met her gaze. To me, days passed. Then weeks. Daniel continued to seek her company. They shared meals, exchanged stories, debated philosophy and engineering. He never rushed her, never treated her injuries as weakness. When her leg tired, he adjusted his pace without comment. Others noticed. Whispers followed them. Confusion. Mild ridicule. Why would a human invest time in someone no one else wanted? Saris noticed too. Your reputation may suffer, she warned him one evening. Daniel smiled slightly. I can live with that. She studied him carefully. Why? He took a moment before answering. Because you are honest. Because you endured. Because you think deeply and care quietly. Those things matter to humans. Her breath caught, just slightly. No one had spoken of her that way since before the war. Eventually, the next pairing cycle approached. Saris assumed the pattern would repeat. Daniel would move on. Humans were not bound by alliance traditions. On the final day, the hall filled once more. Saris stood in her usual place, prepared for disappointment. Daniel walked forward when the coordinator invited declarations. I wish to make my intent known, he said clearly. The room fell silent. I wish to court Saris, he continued, with the goal of lifelong partnership. Gasps echoed softly across the hall. Saris turned to him, stunned. Daniel, you do not have to. I know, he said quietly, meeting her eyes. I want to. For the first time in many cycles, Saris felt something unfamiliar rise within her chest. Not pity, not duty, hope. The hall did not return to normal after Daniel's declaration. Even when the session officially ended, many beings remained where they stood, watching Saris and the human as if they were an unsolved problem. Whispers followed them as they left together, not loud, but constant. Curiosity, disbelief, quiet judgment. Saris felt all of it. She had trained herself long ago to ignore the stares, but this was different. This attention was tied to choice, and choice was dangerous. It could be taken back. People are staring, she said softly, as they walked through the corridor. Daniel nodded. They were staring before too. Just for different reasons. That is not the same, she replied. Before, I was invisible. Now I am questioned. He glanced at her. Does that frighten you? She considered the question carefully. Yes, And no, I am afraid of believing in something that may not last. Daniel slowed his pace so she could walk comfortably. I won't pretend to know the future, but I don't make choices lightly. That honesty eased her, even as uncertainty remained. In the days that followed, the station council requested formal interviews. Interspecies courtship, especially one that challenged alliance norms, required review. Daniel answered questions calmly. He spoke of compatibility, shared values, mutual respect. He refused to reduce Ceres to a symbol or a statement. She is not an idea, he said during one session. She is a person. Ceres sat beside him, silent by custom. She watched the reactions closely. Some council members looked unsettled, others thoughtful. Afterward, she asked, "You speak as if you expect resistance." "I do," Daniel replied. "Change makes people uncomfortable." She gave a faint smile. "You seem comfortable with discomfort. Humans get a lot of practice," he said lightly. Not everyone reacted with quiet skepticism. Some were openly dismissive. A delegation from Ceres's own species requested a private meeting with her. They gathered in a modest chamber, their posture formal, their expressions controlled. "You have caused confusion," one elder said. Ceres inclined her head respectfully. "That was not my intent." "Intent is irrelevant," another replied. "Your injuries already place you outside ideal representation. Associating with a human worsens perception." Ceres felt the familiar weight press down on her. She had expected this. "I did not choose to be injured," she said calmly. "I chose to survive." "That choice is no longer questioned," the elder responded. "But your future choices affect more than you." Ceres held her ground. "My future has already been decided by others many times. I am allowing one choice to be mine." Silence followed. Not approval, but not rejection either. When she returned to Daniel, he noticed the tightness in her shoulders immediately. "They weren't kind," he said. "They were honest," she replied. "That is sometimes worse." He offered no argument, only presence. It was enough. As weeks passed, their bond deepened in quiet ways. They spent time in the station gardens, where plants from many worlds grew under shared light. Daniel learned how Ceres's people expressed emotion through subtle shifts in posture, rather than facial expression. Ceres learned how humans used humor to soften fear and frustration. She watched how he treated others: maintenance workers, translators, security staff. He greeted them all with the same respect he showed her. There was no performance in it. "You do not change yourself depending on who is watching," she observed once. Daniel shrugged. That sounds exhausting. For Ceres, it was astonishing. Yet doubt lingered. Late one cycle, as they sat watching the stars, she finally voiced it. "You may grow tired," she said, "of adjusting your pace, of explaining your choice, of defending me." Daniel looked at her steadily. "Do you grow tired of walking with your brace?" "Yes," she admitted. "But you still walk," he said. She was quiet for a long time after that. The Alliance station moved on, as it always did. Trade continued. Research advanced. But small shifts occurred. Others began speaking to Ceres more often, not all with kindness, but with acknowledgement. Some asked her opinion on logistics, on conflict recovery. Her experience, once ignored, slowly regained value. One afternoon, a junior officer approached her hesitantly. "Your strategies during the border war are still studied," he said. "I did not know you were here." Ceres was surprised. "I did not know anyone remembered. They were Wansum. I did not know anyone remembered. 3 num." Ceres was surprised. Ceres was surprised. The officer nodded. "Humans asked about you. They were curious why someone with your record was unrecognized." That night, Ceres sat alone for a long time. She realized something within her had shifted. She no longer felt like a burden being carried. She felt like someone walking beside another. The turning point came without warning. A minor systems fault began in the outer ring. At first, it seemed insignificant. Then power fluctuations spread. Environmental controls in several sectors began to fail. Confusion rippled through the station. Saris recognized the pattern immediately. "This isn't random," she said to Daniel. "It's a cascade failure. Can you help?" he asked. "I can," she replied without hesitation. They moved quickly. Daniel coordinated with human engineers, adapting tools and interfaces. Saris directed energy reroutes, her voice steady, her mind sharp. She moved slower than others, but her commands were precise. Some questioned her authority at first. Then they saw results. Stabilization came after long hours. The crisis ended without loss. In the aftermath, recognition followed. Not loud praise, but sincere thanks. A council member addressed Saris directly. "Your experience was critical." She inclined her head. "I am glad it was useful." Daniel watched quietly, pride evident but unspoken. Later, when the station returned to calm, Saris spoke softly. "You changed how they see me." You would be receded." He shook his head. "You did that." She met his eyes. "You gave them reason to look." The pairing cycle approached once more. This time, Saris did not stand apart. She stood beside Daniel, not as an exception, but as a choice already made. Uncertainty remained. The future was still unwritten, but she was no longer alone in facing it. The calm after the system's failure did not last long. The Alliance station returned to its usual rhythm, but something had changed beneath the surface. Conversations paused when Saris passed, not out of avoidance this time, but attention. She was no longer unseen. For Saris, this was unsettling in a different way. She had learned how to survive being ignored. Being noticed required new strength. Daniel sensed it. "You don't have to carry this alone," he told her one evening, as they walked through a quiet corridor. "I know," she replied, "but I must still carry myself." That was something he respected deeply. The Council announced an upcoming Alliance Review Summit. Delegations from several systems would arrive to evaluate station leadership, crisis response, and long-term cultural integration. It was a routine event, but this time the recent incident placed the station under greater scrutiny. Saris was surprised when she received a formal request to attend as an advisor. She read the message twice before believing it. "They want my input." Daniel smiled. "Of course they do. It has been a long time since anyone asked," she said quietly. At the summit, the chamber was filled with layered voices and shifting colors. Species with long lifespans sat beside those with short ones. Traditions clashed gently but firmly. The topic moved from trade to defense to emergency response. When discussion turned to the recent system's failure, blame hovered in the air, waiting to settle. Saris listened carefully. When invited to speak, she rose slowly, steadying herself before stepping forward. Her brace was visible. She did not hide it. "The failure occurred because the system was designed to assume ideal conditions," she said calmly. "Real situations are rarely ideal. Resilience requires planning for weakness, not pretending it does not exist." The room fell quiet. "Many cultures value perfection," she continued. "But survival depends on adaptation. Those with limitations often learn adaptation first." Some shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward. She did not speak long. She did not need to. Afterward, several delegates approached her with questions. Genuine questions. Respectful ones. Daniel watched from a distance, feeling a quiet sense of awe. This was not someone he was rescuing. This was someone reclaiming her place. Not everyone was pleased. A senior representative from a powerful species requested a private audience with Daniel. The room was formal, cold. "You are influencing Alliance perception," the representative said. "Humans already disrupt balance with emotional choices." Daniel met their gaze evenly. "We make choices based on values. Your bond with the injured one challenges established norms," the representative replied. "It encourages others to question standards." "That sounds healthy," Daniel said. The representative's eyes narrowed. "Standards exist for stability. Stability that ignores reality doesn't last," Daniel answered. The meeting ended without resolution. Later that cycle, Saris found Daniel standing by the viewing window, unusually quiet. "They spoke to you," she said. "Yes. Will this cause trouble for your people?" He considered the question honestly. "Possibly, but humans are used to that too." She studied his face. "If this becomes a burden—" "It won't," he interrupted gently. "Not to me." Still, the station's tension grew. Rumors spread that Alliance leadership might discourage their union for political ease. Saris heard whispers of precedent and image. The doubt returned, creeping in quietly at night. One cycle later, a training incident escalated into something more serious. A visiting ship from a distant system experienced navigation failure while docked. Automatic safeties locked down entire sectors. Hundreds were trapped away from their quarters. Panic spread faster than information. Daniel was called to assist with engineering coordination. Saris moved to the command center without being asked. Some hesitated to stop her. No one did. The situation was complex. The visiting ship used unfamiliar systems. Translation errors slowed response. Each delay increased risk. Saris recognized the structure immediately. "Their control logic is layered," she said. "If we access it directly, we will worsen the lock." "What do you suggest?" a commander asked. "Indirect support," she replied. "Stabilize from the station side. Give them time." Her voice carried authority, earned, not demanded. Daniel worked beside her, adapting human diagnostic tools. Together, they bridged the gap between systems. Others followed their lead. Hours passed. Finally, the lockdown lifted. No one was harmed. Relief washed through the station like breath after holding too long. This time, there was no hesitation. The station commander addressed the gathered teams. Saris's leadership prevented escalation. Daniel Carter's coordination ensured success. Their cooperation exemplifies Alliance strength. Applause followed. Not loud, but sincere. Saris felt something loosen inside her chest. Not pride exactly. Belonging. Later, as they walked back through quiet halls, she stopped. "You could have taken full credit," she said. "Humans are admired here." Daniel looked surprised. "Why would I do that?" "To protect yourself," she answered. He shook his head. "Protecting myself by hiding you would mean losing myself." That was the moment Saris understood fully. This was not curiosity or rebellion driving him. It was commitment. The council convened soon after. Saris and Daniel were invited together. The lead counselor spoke carefully. "Your partnership has influenced station dynamics. Some see risk, others see opportunity." Saris stood straight. "I understand concern." Daniel added, "We are not asking for special treatment." "Then, what are you asking?" the counselor asked. Saris answered this time. "Recognition that worth is not reduced by injury. That unity grows stronger when differences are accepted, not erased." The chamber was silent for a long time. Finally, the counselor nodded. "Your union will not be discouraged." It was not a grand approval. It was something better. Acceptance. When they left the chamber, Saris exhaled slowly, as if releasing years of held breath. "I thought I would feel afraid," she said, "but I feel steady." Daniel smiled. "That's you, not me." That night, Saris returned to her quarters alone. She stood before the mirror, studying her scars. They no longer looked like endings. They looked like history. She thought of the young officer who had thanked her, of the delegates who had listened, of the way Daniel walked beside her. Never ahead, never behind. For the first time since the war, she allowed herself to imagine a future not defined by loss. Not perfect, but chosen. And that made all the difference. The station was quiet that morning. The hum of machinery, a familiar comfort. Saris stood at the observation deck, watching distant stars shift and shimmer. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel the invisible weight of judgment pressing down on her. She had survived injury, doubt, and isolation, and now, she had a voice that others listened to. A place where her presence mattered. Daniel arrived, his steps light but confident. He leaned against the railing beside her, glancing at the stars before meeting her eyes. "You've changed the way they see you," he said softly. Saris shook her head. "Not me. Us. Our cooperation. That made them realize what they were missing." He smiled. "Still, you carried most of the weight." She studied him for a long moment. "You always say that. But you stood beside me. You believed in me." Daniel reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "And I will continue to, as long as you let me." The next cycle brought more movement through the station. Delegations from neighboring systems arrived to observe the changes in alliance dynamics, the recent successes, the demonstrations of adaptability, and the display of cooperation between species had drawn attention. For Saris, it meant more formal invitations, more discussions, and more subtle scrutiny. Yet, the whispers that had once accompanied her steps were gone, replaced with polite acknowledgement. Some were tentative, as if testing the waters of this new reality, but acknowledgement was better than invisibility. Daniel and Saris were invited to a gala event celebrating interspecies collaboration. The room sparkled with crystal lighting, banners of allied worlds swaying lightly above. Delegates mingled, exchanging pleasantries, discussing trade routes, research projects, and diplomacy. Saris moved with care, her brace hidden beneath the folds of her gown. She could feel eyes on her, curious, respectful, some even admiring. Daniel stayed close, offering support when she needed it, but never overbearing. Near the center of the hall, a group of representatives approached them, the same counselor who had formally acknowledged their partnership. "Saris, Daniel, congratulations on your recent contributions," he said. "Your efforts have not gone unnoticed." "Thank you," Saris replied, bowing her head slightly. Daniel added, "We only acted as needed." The counselor shook his head. "More than needed. You've shown that cooperation and understanding can bridge what others believe to be unbridgeable differences. That is remarkable." Saris felt a small warmth in her chest, an unfamiliar but welcome sensation. She had survived so much, and now, she was being recognized not for perfection, but for endurance, wisdom, and heart. As the evening progressed, Daniel guided her to a quieter corner, away from the chatter. He took her hand gently, holding it in a gesture that spoke volumes without words. "Saris," he said, his voice steady, "I have something important to ask you." She looked at him, surprised. "You've asked me before." "This is different," he said, drawing a small, elegant box from his coat. He opened it, revealing a simple yet beautifully crafted ring. "I ask you, now publicly, as my choice and partner in life, to marry me. Not because it is expected, not because it will make others comfortable, but because I choose you." Saris's breath caught. She stared at the ring, then into his eyes, searching for any trace of doubt, pity, or hesitation. She found none. Only sincerity, only steadfast devotion. "You truly mean this?" she whispered. "I do," he said. "I have since the moment I first saw you. Not as someone broken, but as someone strong, someone remarkable, someone I want beside me. Always." Tears filled Saris's eyes, though she did not let them fall immediately. For years, she had believed that her body, her past, her injuries had defined her worth. Yet here was someone who saw beyond all of that, who valued her for what she was, not for what she was missing. She nodded slowly, a smile spreading across her face. "Then yes, Daniel, I will marry you." The room around them seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them, connected by choice, trust, and shared experience. When they finally returned to the gala, whispers had begun again, but this time, they were words of surprise and admiration. Delegates approached to congratulate them, no longer hesitant, no longer dismissive. The human and the alien woman, who had once been invisible or ignored, were now symbols of alliance, resilience, and cooperation. Over the following months, preparations for their union began. The ceremony would honor both their cultures and symbolize the values they had demonstrated: respect, adaptability, and understanding. Representatives from multiple worlds attended, eager to witness the joining of two beings who had defied expectations and redefined strength. Ceres often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the war that left her injured, to the endless cycles of being unchosen, to the quiet moments with Daniel that had built trust and connection, every step had shaped her. She had learned that true strength was not in flawless form or perfect performance, but in endurance, in the courage to continue, and in the choice to accept oneself and others fully. Daniel, too, reflected on the path that had led him to Ceres. He had come to the station expecting engineering challenges and cultural exchange. Instead, he had found someone whose resilience mirrored the best of humanity's spirit. He had learned patience, respect, and the power of seeing worth where others looked away. The day of the ceremony arrived. The station was alive with light and movement. Delegates, engineers, scholars, and travelers gathered to witness the event. Ceres wore a gown that flowed like liquid starlight, adorned with subtle patterns reminiscent of her homeworld. Daniel wore a simple but elegant uniform, reflecting his human heritage while honoring the occasion. As they exchanged vows, their words carried more than personal commitment. They spoke of choice, of respect, of shared strength, and of unity across difference. Their promises echoed through the chamber, reaching those who had once doubted, those who had whispered, and those who had turned away. When the vows were complete, they sealed them with a gesture of mutual respect and connection, a quiet affirmation of partnership that transcended species, culture, and expectation. Applause erupted, sincere and full of warmth. For Ceres, it was a culmination of more than a single day. It was proof that the path she had walked, the choices she had made, and the endurance she had shown mattered. She had been unchosen, overlooked, and underestimated, yet she had persisted. And in that persistence, she had found recognition, belonging, and love. For Daniel, it was affirmation that humanity's greatest strength was in seeing value where others failed to look, in choosing hope over convenience, and in standing firm in belief when faced with doubt. After the ceremony, they walked hand in hand through the observation deck, the stars stretching endlessly before them. Ceres leaned slightly on Daniel, not out of weakness, but in a quiet, comfortable trust. "You were right," she said softly. "Being chosen feels different." "Oh," Daniel smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "Because it's real. Because it's not about perfection, but about presence, about commitment, about heart." Ceres nodded, feeling a fullness she had never known before. She looked out at the stars, feeling small and infinite at the same time. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless beings, challenges, and unknowns. Yet here, in this moment, she felt the power of choice, the strength of partnership, and the enduring spirit of humanity reflected in one human who had seen her for who she truly was. Their story became known throughout the station and beyond, not as a tale of scandal or rebellion, but as an example of what could happen when beings looked beyond appearance, beyond expectation, and beyond fear. Young officers and delegates spoke of the human who chose the alien woman, and of the alien woman who proved that endurance and wisdom were stronger than perfection. Years later, Ceres and Daniel would often return to the observation deck together. They would speak of the alliance, of their work, of the lives they had touched and saved. And when the stars stretched endlessly before them, they would remember the journey that had brought them here, a journey of survival, recognition, and love. In the quiet hum of the station, amid the bustle of countless species and shifting stars, two beings walked together, not because they were perfect, not because others approved, but because they chose each other. And that choice changed everything. The galaxy had seen strength in many forms, but it had never before seen a union like this one, built on respect, endurance, and the courage to see the value in what others overlooked. Humanity had shown its heart, and through that heart, the alien woman found her own worth renewed. Together, They stepped forward, ready to face whatever the universe might bring, hand in hand, chosen and unbroken. The stars beyond the observation deck seemed to shine a little brighter, as if celebrating the triumph of choice, resilience, and the enduring spirit that both species had come to honor. And in that quiet, infinite expanse, the galaxy whispered a simple truth. Strength is not in perfection, but in courage, compassion, and the power to choose love when it matters most.